Hello, SMITE fans, and welcome back to another day of the SMITE Pro League here in Week 6, day number 2 on this fantastic Saturday afternoon. My name is J-Mac. I got Charlie joining me to talk about our stuff, but before we talk about that, I got something very special we got to talk about. You already guys know, Prime Gaming, the sub, or not the sub, Prime Gaming subs you do get, but Prime Gaming, the title sponsor of Season 9 of the SPL, so make sure that you make the most of your Prime Gaming subscription and your Prime membership in general. Get free shipping, music, movies, and more, and some of that more includes games whenever you link that over to your Twitch account. New games every single month. We're already halfway through the month, so that means you're halfway to a brand new catalog of games and all kinds of new content in the games that you are already playing. Thank you so much for Prime for being the sponsor of Season 9 of the SPL. As I said, I'm J-Mac. I got Charlie joining me on the desk. We got some great games ahead of you guys today, starting out with a really important one, and one that's got a pretty good storyline behind that one. Charlie, we're going to have the Atlantis Leviathans and the Camelot Kings to start our day.
Yeah, I mean, the Camelot Kings were looking nigh unstoppable, top of the leaderboard, and then, of course, the Atlantis Leviathans came in, and they were able to take them off their undefeated streak. So the last time they faced a fight this back that the Camelot Kings were on top, the Leviathans were the ones that put that loss on their record.
Which means we should have a very interesting matchup, at least for this very first one, and then we've still got more SPL today and more SPL tomorrow. So we'll take a look at the schedule and see if you've missed out on anything, especially if you missed out on yesterday's set. Definitely go back and watch that Olympus Bolts and Jade Dragons, a full 3-game set between those two teams. The Solar Scarabs able to find a 2-0 over the Valkyries, though it wasn't necessarily an easy 2-0 for the Scarabs. Both those games end up going 30, 35-plus minutes on each of those ones. And then today, Camelot Kings and Leviathans, our first match of the day, and the Oni Warriors and the Tartars Titans to round out our day. And that should also be a very fun and a very interesting set. So make sure that you're watching the entirety of today, and why not come back and watch all of tomorrow as well? Triple header Sunday is always an exciting one. But this very first matchup, as you mentioned, talking about the standings, the Camelot Kings, the only blemish on their record is the Atlantis Leviathans. That was during the first half of our phase. Atlantis Leviathans have been a bit more on the uprising as of this phase. You know, phase 1 was a bit of a struggle for them. Phase 2, finally able to find some of their footing, able to find 2 wins on what was 2 undefeated teams at the time with the Bolts, and now the Camelot Kings, they're rematching right now.
Yeah, it's hard watching the Leviathans and trying to figure out exactly what their play style is, right? Because they take on these top teams and they look so good, and you're like, are the Leviathans back? Are they back to their former glory? They're knocking down everyone, and they also lose to some of these teams that you'd expect them to be able to win against, some things like that. But, you know, it seems like they had the Camelot Kings number, right? They were able to take them down, and I think a lot of that off the back of, you know, the solo lane. You know, Jarcorrr has been playing so well in this solo, and I think the solo meta has been shifting so much where, you know, back to these gods where just tried and true warriors and guardians back in the solo lane. And I think that's a play style that Jarcorrr likes a lot. The Artios, things like that. These are where he's able to get pressure and impact the map so well.
Yeah, and I think that's what kind of the story of the Leviathans has always been is, you know, once the meta has finally developed itself, the Leviathans are a team that have dialed in towards that meta. So once it's finally actually defined, once we know, okay, X, Y, and Z are the top 3 gods in every single role, that's when the Leviathans have really stepped themselves up. That's when they've really honed in on that kind of a play. Sometimes it takes them a couple weeks. Sometimes it may even take them a month. I mean, we look back towards Phase 3 of Season 8. They were kind of hitting that stride. They were almost there, but not quite entirely. And then once we started getting to the World Championships runs, and then once we actually got to the World Championships, that's when we see this team really explode, especially off of Jarcorrr.
Yeah, well, if that's the case, then I don't know how they're going to look today, right? Because we just hit the mid-season patch. Everything is changing up a little bit. Itemization could be changed up, which means I'm not going to say there's a defined meta. We have seen something sort of shift into play where it's like, okay, maybe this is going to be very strong, that sort of thing. But I don't know that everything is quite ironed out in the build path, I should say, at the very least. So if the Leviathans have been, you know, sitting back, studying up at home, watching these games, that sort of thing, and, you know, during their scrim session, taking all this information, being a sponge for the meta in that sort of, you know, regard, then I think that'll be a good spot for them, right? They'll be able to understand a little bit more. But up against the Camelot Kings, who usually, I will say usually, are on top of the map no matter what, right? They know how to farm the map so well. They're always going to be able to find these small gold leads, constantly getting so much just objective fight around that, and, you know, you got to be worried, right?
Yeah, especially up against a player like Variety, who has such a unique playstyle and such a unique mentality when it comes to the solo lane. I mean, if, again, X, Y, and Z God are good, Variety may or may not play them just depending on how he feels that morning. He said, man, King Arthur and Artio are meta. What if I just play Osiris instead? Or, you know, what if I just play Ratatosker instead? You know, Variety, and really the entirety of the Camelot Kings are unique in that aspect of, these guys are some of the biggest minds of the game more than anything. We always kind of talk about them being one of the theory crafters of the SPL. You know, what works out? What can we get away with doing? You know, what kind of stranger picks that not many people are playing can we get to actually work out? You think of even genetics over in like the support role with the horse support, something we don't see often, but something that he's made his name known for. And Variety, the stubborn player of the solo lane, as long as he can get something that he can kind of bully on for a little while, usually that lane goes pretty well for him.
Yeah, it's interesting because Variety, I like the way you phrased it. It really just depends on how he's feeling that day. We don't know what's going on in their comms. We don't know if they're like, hey, Variety, we're putting you on this pick. You know, I just imagine he's like, do I have to play Artio again? You know, I just want to play Bologna. I just want to run at people. I don't care the matchup. But you're right to highlight. He does have these weird different styles of picks, like the Ratatoskr, for example, that can always impact the map throughout the game. Maybe it's not going to win lane early, and he's never been a player that really cares about that, right? He'll go down 0-4 and still be able to impact late game. It's just the way he's able to play, and I think off the back of the rest of his team, you know, being able to keep the farm up for him, he can play those different styles, and it's not going to affect their 5v5 too much.
Yeah, I think that's an important thing really with both of these teams is that they have so many different players on the team that they can play through. It's not necessarily even like a more often than not that they play through the solo lane, but very often we do see that the solo laners make a big impact. And we got a chance to sit down with a couple of players from both these teams to talk with them and get their thoughts on the set.
Performance this week, you know, it's very clean. We had both games 2-0, so that's a nice little confidence boost. We've been playing really well. We're top of the league right now. Only lost one game, that's the Leviathans, so yeah.
I feel like we didn't like had a strong point against Oni Warriors, and we didn't have like a plan. So now against the Titans, we did a better job doing something at least, and we had a plan against it. So I feel like from now we're just gonna have a plan against every team and, you know, do our best.
Changes going into the mid-season, I think obviously the DR change is going to be a huge factor for like a lot of gods. You know, like gods right now, like Xing, he's going to maybe fall off a little bit because of how DR works on his 2. Apart from that, the new earring items, it's hard to say since we haven't really played with them that much, but I think that some of them will be meta. I also just think in general, like the new glyphs, like the executioner glyphs and all that stuff, I think it's going to impact certain picks. Maybe gods which, you know, like a jungler, for example, like Nem can go execution now and go for the upgrade where, you know, you get like 30% pen after 2 autos. I think it's going to depend. It's going to like change the jungle pool a lot.
Probably the 60% cooldown, and I think supports are gonna be like a little bit better in terms of like god pools. I feel like support mages are probably a thing, and there's a lot of fun stuff for supports in this season probably.
How Leviathans have changed since we last played them, I honestly don't think they have changed at all. I think last time we played them, we should have 2-0'd them, to be honest. I think we just kind of, not getting our own heads, well, we just kind of played bad late game and they kind of outplayed us a bit. But in terms of how they've changed, I don't think they've changed much, but obviously there's a big patch coming in, so, you know, they could change a lot of things by the time we next play them.
Well, now I think they changed a little bit their draft because BigManTingz is playing from Europe. So, I mean, it's not like a huge pin difference, but in a competitor level, you need to be in the same position because, you know, it affects. So I think they changed maybe their 3-3 mid, but I'm pretty sure they are just an intelligent team. They always have like a plan in mind and a backup plan, and it's a very hard team to face against.
I feel like, as a whole, the matchup between us and Leviathans, we tend to take sets off each other like one by one. So we kind of just like handshake, like we win one set, they'll win the next set, and then so on and so on. So going off that, we should win the next set, hopefully.
I think Zapman Netrioid is just like a farm mode. Mia genetics are just like we're just moving the team probably. The matchup that I like is Jarcorrr Variety because it's like the conversation, right? Like it's Variety the #1, Jarcorrr the MVP, you know. So I'm looking for Jarcorrr against Variety.
Couple of interesting points coming out of that one. Ronngyu talking about, well, the matchup that we've been talking about the whole time over into the solo lane, probably being one of the more interesting ones between them. Also kind of just talking about, you know, maybe the what Variety said whenever it comes to our matchups versus the Leviathans. Typically they take one and then we take one. And if history's any indication, at least based off of that, then maybe this is the time for the Camelot Kings to take the win over the Leviathans. But I think also, Charlie, kind of talking a little bit about what Variety's thoughts on the Leviathans as a whole was he doesn't really think the Leviathans have changed all that much, at least as of now. Of course, we haven't really gotten to see the Leviathans on this new mid-season patch just yet to see maybe what kind of new things. So, could see some surprises from this team.
Yeah, that's an interesting point because you can't really assume that they haven't changed because you haven't got to see what they've been able to do with this new patch. I like the phrasing. Wait, Zap does have the Primer Crown on. That's going to give them a little bit of extra power. I didn't even think about that. The Primer Crown, it's got to make sure that you're operating on all cylinders. So definitely watch out for the duo lane as this matchup continues. But it's just an interesting point to make that I think Variety's probably confident. That's why he's saying that. We don't think they've changed that much. But given the way that last matchup went, if they really thought that it was just, we should have 2-0'd, it was just a little couple mistakes that we made here and there, and that, they're that confident, then the Leviathans, they definitely got to make sure to bring it, because just because they won that matchup doesn't mean that they just start sleeping, right? They need to continue to improve because the Kings are still on the top of the standings for a reason.
Yeah, the Kings definitely still sitting at the top of the charts as far as the standings are concerned. And I mean, if we look at some of the plays and some of the games that these guys have played, they've also got some of the biggest beatdowns when it comes down to the league. I mean, teams that they've been able to absolutely roll through. I mean, I think back to their Scarab set at the first half of the phase. I think to the Valkyrie set in the first half of the phase. Even just their most recent, actually no, it's the recent one that they just had here. So when it comes down to this team, I mean, the Kings are a team that can just absolutely stomp anybody in front of them. Or it could be a little bit of a closer matchup. Sometimes it'll drag out to 3 or be a little bit longer of a 2-game set out there. And I think while we talked a lot about Variety, I think CaptainTwig is probably one of the big names in there. Really, this entire team as a whole are all just a group of playmakers, but they're also a great group of role players. And that's something that it's a phrase that we hear a lot of the time where people think, okay, well, what do they mean by I'm a role player? It means that they are a player who is very good at the role that they are playing in. They are, like BigManTingz is a very good mid laner, knows how to play the mid, knows what his job is in the mid. And that's something that CaptainTwig in previous interviews has said about his team is everybody on our team knows what they have to do into a fight, knows what they need to do for communication, and that's what's one of their keys to success.
When you said they're great role players, I just imagine them just LARPing in like the park, just like with some night costumes on, and they're just
Variety's out there playing as King Arthur, just in the park on live.
We are the Camelot Kings, and they're great role players. But yeah, I think you're right to highlight. I think as you said, they're able to snowball these teams, or the game's gonna go late, and it's usually off the back of Twig. If he's playing something like hyper aggressive, so like an Osiris, like an Erlang Shen, one of these warriors that gets active early, then sure, they're going to be able to get ahead super fast and just roll through a team. But if Twig's playing something and he wants to dial it back, he's not getting aggressive early, they have no problems waiting for late game, waiting for BigManTingz to pop up, waiting for Netrioid to pop up. That's not going to be an issue for them either. It really just depends on the sort of draft they go. And you got to talk about the supports in a situation like this where the Levi's have Ronngyu, who loves that Umoja, but Genetics also can't have that Umoja. I imagine that will never get through. In a set like this, I don't think the Umoja will ever get through for either of these supports to take over. So, the picks and bans are definitely going to be a contention point here, trying to get these supports on something to try and find some aggression, right? I mean, trying to facilitate that dual lane, make sure that your hunter feels okay and they can get some farm for the late game. Both of these supports love doing that, and they both, it's just some of the best supports in the game right here.
Yeah, I mean, all of the supports within the SPL, but these two teams specifically, and I think that these two players, more than anything, share a lot of similarities in their god pools. When I think of, top 3 gods for both of these teams, I immediately, for both of them, think of Umoja. I also think of Horus as 2 gods that both of these guys really like to play whenever they get the opportunity, whenever he becomes meta. And I even think of gods like Ymir and Terra to kind of pop up in there as well. So when it comes to these guys, I imagine there'll be a lot of parity when it comes to their god pools. For my money, I would say Genetics probably has a slightly deeper god pool than Ronngyu, just because by nature, it's been forced on Genetics more often than not. I mean, I think back to some of my very first casts and very first interviews that I got to have with Genetics and the Kings, and there was one set where Genetics was like 7 or 8 gods deep in the pool because that many supports and guardians were being banned away from him, and he's still popping. He's taking Cerberus over as support because literally everything else was taken, and he's going 4-0 in a game like that. So when it comes down to that support god pool, I got to imagine top 3 selection probably for both these teams. That way they don't have to dig a little bit further in.
Yeah, I mean, you got to watch out for the Genetics god pool, because even if you are banning away, like you said, the emojis, he'll pull out Ymir, and you're not banning a Ymir, right? No matter how much.
Against him, I am.
Oh, yeah, against
Genetics, I am.
Yeah, you try to draft against it, okay, we're going to have to deal with walls, let's just get around that. And then how do you play against the Horus? You never know where he's going to fly through to the sky, so I think you're right to highlight that. You just have to. I don't envy the position that these coaches are in, trying to figure out what to draft, what to ban against either of these squads, because on paper it looks like a top 4 team versus a #1 seed should be pretty easy for the Kings, but their one loss was against Leviathans for a reason, and they know. I liked what Ronngyu said in the interview, where he said, the one that we've been losing these games when we come in and we don't have a plan. We're gonna make sure that we have a plan going into this match, and then we're gonna find a way to execute that. And if that's the idea, because they've been able to sit back and watch 10 games at this point the Kings have played, they have to be prepared for this, right? They have a plan, and I'm sure that they're going to be able to execute.
And that's something that we talk to teams all the time about. So, your next matchup is against X team. What are your plans? What are your thoughts about that?
And they never tell us.
They never tell us, obviously. But usually it's along the line of we just take every set one at a time. Whenever it comes to the team that we're going to be playing up against, that's when we start making their preparations. And it kind of sounds almost like a cop out. It's like, oh yeah, once we get ready to play them, then we'll kind of find that plan. But I think that Ronngyu actually spelling that out means that we could see some very interesting stuff for the picks and bans in game #1 at the very least between the Leviathans and the Camelot Kings. But as we've seen sometimes, Trelly, game 1 it tends to be kind of the more meta style of bans. Okay, what worked well for this team either against us the last time or just in general, we ban those. And then when we start getting into games 2 and potentially games 3, that's when we start seeing the actual immediate development, the immediate adaptations between these teams. And as far as our first bans are going between these teams, it will be Khepri and Erlang for the Leviathans. The Camelot Kings will take away Dodgy and Chernobog.
And there's no way the Kings don't use Umoja in that last slot. Look at the percentage there. Against the Leviathans, 72%. Against the Kings, 71%. Across the whole SPL, 71%. That's
impressive.
Yeah, there's a reason this character's not allowed in most of these games as is, and against with these two support players nonetheless. I don't imagine we'll be getting through. With the Erlang Shen band, however, that does mean that Osiris could be on the table. So the Leviathans have to think about that. Do they want to ban the Umoja and just say, okay, we'll force you into giving us that Osiris, or let them both through and they guarantee get one? I mean, if the Kings wanted to, they could let both through as well. But again, I don't imagine letting Ronngyu have Umoja as the option here with the Leviathans in first pick. That's the position they're in, and that's why the Kings have to sit here and think about this one for a second. It's just one of those things where, that they just don't know what they want to give up. And it looks like Artio will be the ban. So now you're in a position where, in my mind, you have to ban Umoja and you give up Osiris. That's where the Kings have been forced into. They had to know something like this was coming.
Yeah, I mean, when you're put in the second pick position and you know that both your supports are going to want that god, it's just a matter of, are you willing to risk giving Ronngyu over to Umoja? Or Umoja over to Ronngyu. My mistake on that, but it's a tough spot for the Camelot Kings. There's so many other things still available. As you mentioned, the Osiris is up. Ullr is available to the mid lane. That's something Sheento has been playing a lot. Nemesis over in the jungle if they want to go with that route. But it will be the Umoja ban by the Camelot Kings. So they're not going to let that one fall through. They're not going to give that one over to the Atlantis Leviathans. And they're not going to take the risk if the Leviathans were going to maybe give that up as a first pick spot in case. But it will be the Osiris as a first pick, as you mentioned earlier, Trelly.
Yeah, that had to be the play. And now the Kings are in a position where, hey, do we take away that Ullr that we know that Sheento wants? Do we grab it at the moment? Because Zapman's been playing mages. So Eset is going to be what they are going to grab. I was going to say, are you going to take the mages away from Zapman? And it looks like that could be the play. I mean, it is the play. They locked in the Eset, and that is something that Zapman was playing. Where it goes, we'll have to see. It could be, we've seen it in support a few times, more often than not as of recent. In the mid lane, just full damage, but I'm going to hold on to just the question of it all, because I think Eset still has some prowess there with the new Lonos mask. Could probably still work in support as well. And that's going to leave open Olorun, a pick that we saw pretty highly played for a bit. Sort of fell off, but there are some new Mage ADC items that could bring him back into favor. And we will also see Ullr. So that's what we were expecting, right? The Ullr had to be locked in there if it wasn't grabbed before. The Olorun is a little interesting, but I think just if you're trying to play through Teamfight, one of the best Teamfight ults in the game, bar none, Sanctified Field just brings so much disruption.
Now that leaves a couple questions for the Kings is, how do we want to deal with this Olorun more often than not? It ends up becoming the question when you get into a matchup like this. How do we get to this Sanctified Field? Do we draft a Vamana? Well, Nemesis already locked in, and unless they're going to throw a Vamana solo and the Xing Chen goes over to the support role or something like that, that might be ruling that one out. Do you draft a Cthulhu to try and deal with that one? Well, depends on where the Xing Chen ends up going, if Cthulhu might be the answer to that one. Even Camazotz sometimes also comes into that same question. So that's where, at least for me, Trelly, is where my discussion now comes over to the Camelot Kings, is that they have the Osiris, the Olorun, and the Ullr, most likely going to be the jungle and then the duo mid as far as their carries go. So for the Camelot Kings, as they start out their bans, they take away the Fafnir, which is just a good call when you go up against this many auto attackers. Balone the opposite way, something good for variety. Do the Kings need to maybe draft something in that solo lane that can deal with this Olorun once that mid-late game starts coming around?
Yeah, I do think it's something that's going to be necessary here, but something that I would be interested to see is, Eset support Xing solo and then grab the Neath for BMT. That could be interesting as well. It's just one of those things where you have plenty of magical damage with the Eset and the Xing. Then you have ton of free CC onto Olorun. You can force out the beads with the Spirit Arrow and then go through with the Whirlwind of Rage and Steel. It seems like the Leviathans are focused on the solo lane ban, so they're more convinced that BMT's on the Eset and that just genetics will take that Xing support, and then they have to worry about the Warriors. As the draft peters out, maybe we'll get some insight as to where the Kings want to go with that draft. The Leviathans, though, there's not too much to be discovered here. That just looks to me like the Osiris probably in jungle. It could also go over to Jarcorrr, but I think Panitom's probably playing it. And then Sheento's taking the Ullr because it's Sheento, and then Zapman's going to continue the streak with the mages. There certainly are some other options there, but to me, given the fact that Sheento loves this Ullr so much, everything else sort of just has to follow suit there. And now the Camelot Kings will reveal something to us about this draft. Will they grab, I don't know, for example, that Chiron that Netrioid loves so much is still open, and it does have a decent matchup. If you can cleanse out your team, it will help out a ton against these axes and things like that. They just have so many options here because of the way the bans have went.
Yeah, we do have a couple big slots open. It will be Chiron.
I'm just on point today.
You're on fire, Trelly. I don't know what it is, man. I don't know what you put in your breakfast this morning, but you got it going on. And Chiron will be the selection for the Camelot Kings. It was Nox and King Arthur as the final two bans. So the Leviathans don't feel like this Xing is going over to the solo lane. They think the Xing might be going over to genetics instead, then potentially throwing that Eset in the mid lane and the Chiron, as far as we're concerned, over towards Netrioid. So now it goes over back to the Leviathans. They hovered the Giannis from them, which kind of had me scared, and immediately they changed away from there because I'm like, is this Ullr then going over to Jarcorrr? And then they would throw the Giannis in the mid. But now hovering Cabrakan and Camazotz. It won't be Cabrakan, it'll be Terra changed around. So there's our pick for Ronngyu. They're giving us a little panic attacks with every pick that they're going
played
with.
the Janus, remember, at the beginning? It
Okay,
didn't go well.
all right.
Remember? He did.
We don't. That was the set they lost to the Valkyries, wasn't it?
And then they played it again. So Ronngyu was thinking about playing the Terra, and then he was like, you know what? I mean, the Janus. And then he's like, you know what? We'll go with the Terra here.
Yeah,
so
I'm glad he didn't.
yeah, this is a much different draft than we thought. So I do think still Panitom taking that Osiris to the jungle. Jarcorrr on the famous Camazotz solo, which has been famously difficult to deal with. Soul Eater could always be an option. You have so much sustain in that lane. On top of the Terra, the Olorun, you've got a lot of healing that you're going to have to watch out for if you are the Camelot King. Sustain seems to be something that the Leviathans have in spades at the moment. With the Olorun heal as well, it's just going to start to add up. Now we finally get to see the last pick here, and for my money, probably could be a Warrior, unless, of course, Variety wants to take that Xing. And now, so let me think about this.
So,
If BMT is taking the AMC, Netrioid on the Chiron, then it would put Xing in the solo and genetics on that Eset.
yeah.
So I think that makes sense. Notably, Variety has played the AMC solo before, and afterwards he said, I didn't like it. Like he's like, I don't want to play.
That's because he got camped by a Fenrir the whole game.
He was like, I don't like playing AMC solo. I don't think I'll do that again. So because of that, I'm still going to stick to my guns here and say that genetics is going to go the Lonos Mask Eset support. So that Xing into solo, and then you got a very solid Hunter comp with some prot tread with the AMC Stinger and Nemesis. I mean, it looks like a great draft throughout.
Yeah, but looking at this draft, Charlie, I'll come back to maybe my prior discussion earlier, which is always been one of the problems is dealing with Olorun, dealing with that sanctified field. Do you feel that with the draft that the Camelot Kings have been able to put together, especially with that back two, the Chiron, the AMC, do you think that they have the tools that it takes to either play in this team fight or maybe play kind of around the team fight that this Olorun can provide for the Leviathans?
Yeah, no doubt it's not going to be easy. Whirlwind of Rage and Steel is a great tool for disrupting Olorun. If you can just force his ult and get those beads down ASAP, then of course the snipes can come through from Chiron. You don't even have to deal with him. But that's in a perfect world. Relics exist, outplays exist, positioning exists. It's going to be difficult to get to this Olorun, and if the positioning is on point, then the late game is not going to look easy. Anytime Sanctified Field is in question, you have to make sure that all of that is pristine. But I do think they've got enough CC immunity here and enough range damage where they don't have to get to the Olorun every fight. They just have to make sure the relics are down, back out, and then maybe if you waste the Sanctified Field, you bail out, then you can go in and re-engage.
Now, when we look at both these kind of team compositions here, anytime that we draft an Eset, one of the big things that we talk about is the ability for both these teams to really just kind of burn through objectives or be able to secure objectives out there. Both these teams now with, or at least some form of double hunter comp to actual traditional hunters for the Kings. and then a Magical Hunter and a regular Hunter for the Atlantis Leviathans. So, Shirley, when it comes down to the objective play, do you have any kind of favoritism towards one of these two drafts around that kind of play?
You know, circle protection's always going to be put into question, but if it is, you know, full support build, then you're not going to have too much damage there. It can still be out-confirmed with a little bit of CC and making sure that you're, you know, on point there. But, you know, objective team fight play has to go to the Kings early on until late game when you get Sanctified Fields and you're able to use that every single time, right? Because if the fights are happening quickly, then you don't have Sanctified Field up. But if it's just one fight at the Fire Giant decides the game, you just have to make sure that one ult counts. So whenever there's an Olorun on the field, I have to make sure it's a toss-up. There's no way it just goes to either one of these. It all depends on how that Sanctified Field is used and if you can make the most use out of it.
So does that then translate kind of towards the actual late game play for both these teams? As long as Sanctified Field is up, Atlantis Leviathans might have that advantage, or will the Camelot Kings be able to take advantage of the fact that there's an Olorun over there? Game number 1 between the Leviathans and the Camelot Kings has got to start up, and we'll throw it over to Dave and Gore to bring us the action.
A little bit of history here in Season 9 between these two teams. The Camelot Kings undefeated for a large portion here of phase number 2. And guess who handed them a loss score?
Was
this
guys.
these Atlantis Leviathans? My goodness, it was. But then the Leviathans, like a week or two, and they beat the undefeated Bolts. And then a week or two later, these Atlantis Leviathans lose to the Scarabs, then lose another set. I mean, it's been such a hard team to figure out here in phase 2. The Kings, outside of that one loss to this Atlantis Leviathans team, have not stumbled, though, because the Kings, Gore, they are on a warpath here in phase 2. It is a squad that looks near unbeatable. I am excited about this rematch between these two squads. We'll see if the Leviathans can hand the Kings another loss.
I really like how Variety put it in the interview earlier, where he said, you know what, we just kind of, for some reason, seem to trade sets with the Leviathans.
Yeah,
and
right.
he's like, so, you know, theoretically we lost last time. This one should be us. And I think that they've done a great job. I think, you know, not just Biggie behind the scenes, but the team as a whole, very, very, like, cerebral when it comes to approaching the game. They play their style incredibly well, which is, like, a vague way to describe their team, but you know, Variety, they said this on the desk, is going to play what Variety wants. Twig is going to play what Twig wants. Sometimes it's going to be meta, sometimes it's not, but they're going to play it incredibly well. And so I'm excited to see what they can do here, because I think this is the kind of team that will have adapted to the Leviathans.
Well, a slight 2v2 over in solo gives the first totem of coup of the game to the Camelot Kings. A small win, the first objective secure over to the Kings. And the desk was speculating. That's 71 gold, Gore. Makes all the difference here in the early game. The desk was speculating where this Eset may end up landing. Goes over to genetics.
Yep.
It is the Mask start, remember, with the most recent update to the game. Mask now a starter item, not something you buy as an actual item a bit later on, and then it's more of a curve now in the way that those stats, mitigations, damaging, things like that are applied throughout the game. Still works.
Yep.
Just at a bit of a different rate for genetics here on this Eset.
And, you know, again, early on helps you be a little tankier, right?
Right.
Admittedly, you're going to deal less damage, but that's the fun thing about Eset, and I think this is actually what makes this mask work really well for her. The damage numbers on Spirit Ball specifically, max range Spirit Ball is 1.5x the amount, so
Right.
you're losing some damage on it, but the further out you are when you're firing it anyway, you're still getting a good chunk from it. And plus, you're not looking at them for the damage, right? I mean, admittedly, it is going to hurt a little bit of your secure. We've been talking about that a lot this year with Eset supports. Circle of Protection not being this huge burst mage ability like we've seen in the past means that it's a little easier for a team to come in and slink an ability in right before you if they have something that does a lot of burst. In this case, you know, you're looking at like a wild combo from Sheento or from Zap to make it happen, but for the most part, you know, Circle of Protection is going to guarantee more abilities for you.
Another rotation of the junglers over to the right side. This time, Variety will pick up the blue buff as CaptainTwig will end up going back to also help Variety get his actual blue buff. So a sneaky little invade there for Variety. Not often you're seeing a Xing Gore pulling pressure over there in the solo lane up against an Osiris, but feeling just fine right now against Jarcorrr.
It's especially against the Osiris. That's the impressive part
Right.
about this. It's one of those things, I mean, you know, decent clear, good control, but like Osiris has an attack chain that smacks everybody. What is that? What do they call splash damage?
Yeah, splash.
That is going to hit everybody in his attack chain. And he's got good clear on his too. Like, you know, you have to position the minions in a certain way to make sure they all get hit most of the time. It should be pretty easy to do. But it's incredible, I think, for Variety to be able to find this amount of control. I think in small part to Twig showing up when Twig has the right opportune moments to make sure they can get aggressive, whether it's onto the coup to push Hardcore back, or it's into the blue buff to get this extra level, have that little bit of experience, and kind of force him. I think it showcases how well tenured Variety is in this solo lane, because he's played the Guardians, he's played when it's Assassins, he's played when it's Hunters, he's played when it's Mages, he's played when it's anything over there. So I think this is just a good showcase of what he's able to control, and also why Ronngyu said that was the matchup he was looking forward to in this set.
Yeah, Variety's just been so strong for this team. Remember when Twig did his fraud tier list, Variety was the only one on the Kings. His own teammate was in the no help category. Everyone else was
which you would think
was somewhat fraudulent.
I think that's some incredible self-awareness from Twig, but also maybe something that could be addressed.
Right, you would think.
Feels like an actionable
thing, right? I would be nervous that it would give his teammate too big of a head, but I asked Twig about it, and he said, "Nah, Variety's already got like a certain level of ego, right? And so being high on or I guess low on a fraud tier list that doesn't change his mental at all. Like, he already knew. So no big difference for Variety. But point being, such a strong member of this Kings team. Now, Jarcorrr is as well. I mean, it's a World's MVP you're talking about. So one of the best solo lane matchups you'll get in the SPL. Now, this pace of game, Gore. Now, we're only 5 minutes in. We're not talking about lack of kills or anything yet. But this style of game, the chill out, the farm up, the no heavy investment on jungle ganks, that tends to benefit the Camelot Kings just because of the way that they play the game. And it might seem like nothing is happening, but if you really zoom in, it'll be the farm control. It'll be the one greater Scorpion here, the Pyromancer there, neutral farm in mid. Potentially some damage onto Zapman, who will drop the Sanctified Field and get out. But these styles of games is really where the Kings have made their money.
And what's weird to think about, other than this year, we would have been talking about the Leviathans in the exact same scenario, right? Where it's like, hey, they don't care. And, Season 7, Season 8, we said this so many times to the point where it was almost too much. For some people, it was too much, right? It's 20 minutes. They just want to go in.
Ooh, needed to dodge
Yeah,
it.
if that had connected, that would have been wild. But, 20 minutes, they don't care. Put them into a team fight. They're going to 5-on-5 just better than most people. And now you're in this circumstance where it's been a little shaky for him. That team play is still there, but the strength hasn't been behind it. It hasn't been as overwhelming as it once was for the league, so it's become a little bit easier to deal with. So I think in this matchup, you're very much right? It favors the Kings because historically this season, they've just been able to take on everybody and anybody except the Leviathans and come out with a win. So we'll see, this pace of game, something that I think is, like you said, very favorable to them because of their farm capabilities. And we've seen it. I mean, small camps, not just the blue buff invade over there, but like there was a small invade on the Serpent Lady on the right-hand side. You get things like that around Oracles where we're just presence from the Kings right now. The Totem of Coups are 1 to 3. Like, small things that add up. And you saw it. The gold's not like it's crazy out of hand yet. But when that starts opening up opportunities into Pyromancers, that makes a big difference.
Serpent Lady, I'm holding that as canon now, Gore.
Yeah. She is just a Serpent Lady.
You're not wrong about anything you've said, and so I'm sticking with it. No, I agree. And it really feels like when the game maybe equalizes as far as skill set is, to your point, later on you get to team fight time, and that's what the desk was setting up. A Sanctified Field so strong. Think about Earthen Fury layered with the Sanctified Field, and then all of that dive in from a Camazotz and Osiris. Great team fight for the Leviathans. Kings got it though as well, Circle Protection. And it's the Stinger, Retribution, the ult from the Nemesis combo.
Yeah.
That 1-2 punch, whether used on the same target or different targets, should provide either immediate deletion or a couple, still deletions, but a bit slower. And so I think you look at the pick style of comp the Kings have, good team fighting from the Leviathan, should be dynamic later on as the game goes on. Sheento finds some damage onto Genetics, a stun out from the Eset. Will save his life. Netrioid and Zapman brawling out a bit, baiting out the Sanctified Field. Always going to be worthwhile, even if you take about half of your HP and damage. Now Zapman a bit more susceptible on the left side.
And I really like how they're approaching this, because one thing, you highlighted a lot of really good team fight, I think, late game for the Kings, but also variety fits into that very well, because when you look at Sanctified Fields, you think, I need a long CC immune. Usually we're talking about the Camazotz, we're talking about the Cthulhu. Those were the kind of the big two. But Xing Qin's ult lasts a long time, maybe not as long as the others, maybe not as easily for the Sanctified Fields. You're still going to end up getting slowed a little bit by it, either at the end if you enter with it, or at the very beginning as you run towards them. But that's a long amount of time that you're going to be able to kind of get in there and cause some sort of disruption. Whether or not it results in kills, I think that's going to be up to the Levi's.
BigManTingz takes a burst of damage, but he's going to back away. Just needed a few more buttons, but Panitom's got him. First blood of the Leviathans as the damage is all set up by Sheento, and it is knocked down by Panitom. Easy to get in and out on that Camazotz.
And I've been waiting for him to do something on the Camazotz, specifically because I want to point out there's Panitom on the Camazotz. Normally, even in this meta, it feels like the Osiris, and for the Leviathan specifically, would be in the jungle, and that Jarcorrr would be playing the Camazotz. And I think that they have kind of learned, at least recently, that, sometimes that matchup's going to work out for you. Sometimes you're going to get out-pressured. And if you're getting out-pressured on the Osiris, I can't imagine how devastating this lane could have been if it was a Camazotz. So I like throwing it into the jungle. Again, I think it's got a lot of good chase potential. We just saw its capabilities of diving and, talking about its safety mechanisms in terms of the leap. You've got the pools to be able to heal from. You've got your ult to get you out of pretty much any trouble. I think that Panitom, as well, has just had a really, really interesting year so far. And I'm excited to see what he's going to be able to do on this pick now that it's swapped hands.
Wow, early Gold Fury pull from the Leviathans at the 10-minute mark. This is, look at this. This is why teams don't do it this early. It has taken so long for the Leviathans to finish the objective, but with no eyes from the Kings on the left side of the map. And Gore, the Kings are normally such an objective-minded team. Whether they're securing or at least contesting it, it is unlike the Kings to have an objective this early. Go down that quietly. The Leviathans grab it, and that equalizes and, in fact, gives the Leviathans a bit of a gold lead.
And I think it goes to show not just the amount of gold that you can get from an early Fury, but really, like you said, the difficulty of accomplishing something like that. In that most teams, I think even the Kings are the one I'm thinking of, when they've had successful early Gold Furies, it's this really long, really drawn out trade back and forth between like the support and the carry or whatever as to who's going to be tanking it for a little bit, because it hits so hard. I mean, you saw like Ronngyu was able to get out of there, but a little bit longer. All of a sudden, Rongyu's having to trade that off to somebody else, or if the Kings had any presence over there, that's an easy kill to pick up after the Gold Fury. And so it's a risky play. But they saw, the Kings back. They saw where they were position-wise on the map if they hadn't just backed, and it left them with just an open opportunity. You get a Pyromancer back in your favor, and it keeps the gold within a very easy, recoverable margin. But I definitely think that it's a stronger play for the Leviathans to be able to sneak something, in my mind, much bigger than just the simple Pyromancer.
Yep, an answer back, though, from the Kings. Keeps things stable in the first few minutes of the game. Panitom and Sheento both able to get their Transcendences stacked, stick with some ability-based damage in that second slot, but a different dynamic for both. Panitom going Brawlers, and then Jotuns for Sheento, so needing some anti-heal for sure. Variety agreeing. We'll pick up Contagion with the second item on the Xing Chen. Plenty of sustain, not only with just a Terra. They've got some for Panitom. Zapman with the Bancrofts, excited to see where he goes. Probably nimble as far as the glyph goes. And so sustain really important for both of these squads. Both teams prioritizing anti-heal a bit early.
And I'm really excited to see. First off, I just love Contagion as an item when it comes down to it. I think as far as anti-heals go, I prefer picking it up over Pestilence personally, but that one's really going to be neither here nor there. In this case, you've got the Breastplate, you've got the Contagion, you're stacked a little heavy on physical defense for Variety, because where are you going to be getting a lot of your damage? Osiris in lane immediately, then the Camazotz, and then when you join the other fights, the Ullr. So you're trying to deal with that, kind of showcasing, I think, that Zapman's damage is maybe something that is going to be overlooked a little bit early on. Later on, I think they're still going to need some prots to deal with the Olorun, but for the most part, we always talk about it. It is that Sanctified Fields first, then the Olorun second, that I think most people think of and most people want to deal with. And so Variety is in a good spot for that one. I also really like, and we saw it yesterday, Barra on Soul was doing a very similar build to what Zapman has right now, because the conversation was with the Oloruns, with your Freyas, with your Souls, your Cronoses, all your magical, AD carries. You have to get those rings. So where does this Bancroft slot in? Where do you get your pin? How does it all work together? Where do these builds go? And I like that it's this conversation that with Nimble available to you to give you some of that attack speed that you get from the rings otherwise.
Right.
Now you're getting the lifesteal. Eventually you're getting the attack speed, and you're getting the power. Plus you can slot into a Typhon's Fang, which is going to give you another little big boost for you, as well as some pin on there. So you're feeling, I think, as a whole, better in terms of where these builds are. I'm liking them a little bit more. They might be less of the standard, hey, I'm going to put 4 rings on my hand and then just hit you real hard,
Right.
essentially forming a brass knuckles. But I like the way that it's varied, and I'm going to keep my eye on it because I think that this is going to be fun to watch for Zap.
No, I agree. Look, the Olorun is such a dynamic character. I mean, it's actually a unique conversation because I feel like Olorun, the conversation always reverts back to the sanctified field. And so in that way, it might feel like a one-note character, but the way that changes the game is so dynamic. What it forces out of the opposing team and what it allows your team to facilitate and do. I think the greater picture around it is just so cool. And then you just deal a lot of damage, later on anyway, as long as your auto attacks are hitting. They're connecting well. Still looks like ring option for Zapman, so attack speed will be feeling good nonetheless.
I think a little bit, like we're going to see a mix, right, of the build. And I'm just curious as to what ring options it's going to be. Freya, when we talk about her, you always need something like the hastened ring. I don't think that's as true for some of the others, like a Soul, for the Olorun, for Kronos, things like that. I mean, Kronos has attack speed stims in his kit, so you don't have to worry too much about it. I also think it's fun to talk about because, like you said, whenever it's Olorun, it feels one note, and it's mainly just because, like, the best way I can describe it is, like when I played in jazz band, I played bass trombone, and your bass trombone, your bari sax, and your bass on the other side of the room, you want them to pretty much almost always be heard in the full mix. Like they're going to be playing a little bit louder because they're trying to balance out the 12 other people that are in the room, and I feel like that's you've got the giant, really loud bass in the Zapman kit, in the Olorun kit, which is the ult, which kind of takes over a little bit sometimes. But the rest of it is what makes the music for him, right? Is what really kind of brings it all together. And so I think that when I'm looking over at Olorun, you've got a small knockback, you've got a small heal, you've got good damage in there, really good clear, a lot to your kit. But team fight wise, I want to see a hit 4. I need the base, man. So you got to make sure that it's still in there. Otherwise, the rest of it isn't as good.
It's one note, but one really loud, big,
loud,
beefy note. That's right. Well, we've approached the 16-minute mark, and quite the opposite of what we figured the early game would look like. Normally, we talked about in this style of game, it's the Kings that you look up at the gold lead, you're like, there's one kill. How are the Kings suddenly 6,000 gold ahead? It's been the opposite, where the Leviathans have controlled the neutral farm. Remember that early gold fury makes a big difference here? And that could just be the difference maker. Otherwise everything else maybe feels a bit more stable. Zapman is going to love this pace of game. Netrioid will as well. The ability-based hunter in the Chiron. Something that Netrioid has played a good bit of. And Camelot Kings, in the meantime, pick up the Pyromancer for themselves. That stabilizes the gold lead just a little. But as this game goes on, Gore, I mean, both hunters are scaling up in very different ways where eventually you're going to see Netrioid pop that Centaurus, chunks down his own teammate, chunks down Sheento and Zapman for a good bit of damage, and that totally changes up the team fight.
Yeah.
And on the flip side, Zapman is getting closer to just the shred style of build, so maybe both these hunters feeling okay that they've been able to kick up their feet and farm things up on the left side.
I'm also a big fan. It's such a small thing, and there's a lot of memes about Masterful Shot because much like a new ult, it's very difficult to make sure that you hit that ability. But realistically, it's not even the oh, can you hit it? Oh, what's the damage like on it here? Although we have seen a couple of kills because of it. I think that you start a fight with this ult, you shred people to let's say half, and then when you're done, whether you've missed the shots or you're just falling back, You throw out that masterful shot. Now all of a sudden there's a slow that's kind of spread out everywhere. And it becomes a lot easier to turn that half into a 0 for anybody that was in your way. And so I get excited to be able to see what those capabilities can be. I also think that we saw Chiron kind of fall off a little bit. Like last week, it was kind of teetering on the edge. Some teams were playing him, some teams were ignoring him. The Kings have regularly gone back to it. I think Netrioids look really good on it. And so I'm excited to see if he can kind of keep that pace up, if mid-season, if itemization changes are going to happen, any crazy things down there, or if he's just going to kind of keep playing him the same way.
Yeah, I mean, there's just so much, especially around these updates. A lot feels like it can't change. Here's a bit of an initiation. It's found its way onto Ronngyu, and so is the Stinger. BigManTingz on the board for the Kings. And Ronngyu dead for 30 seconds, and that's a simple initiation from Variety. And that's that knockdown that we talked about. Stinger plus Retribution equals a good kill.
Now you get a little bit more, right? It's awkward for the Leviathans to try and stay in this fight. You're in a 4v5 no matter what. Jarcorr's taking a lot of damage. Variety's still ever present. You used a lot of ults if you're the Kings, but you got Stinger back. You can keep this going.
Panitom rooted, but still has Bat out of hell. Likely be the difference maker. Ronngyu close to respawning, so in the meantime, about 20 seconds have dropped off that death timer. Primal Fury pulled by the Kings. Variety left alone, though. Slowed for eternity. It feels like Panitom blinks over the stun and has eyes for Variety as the Bat out of hell swoops through Shell. Slows down kill pressure, and the Leviathans now have to backpedal. Here's your first Sanctified Field of the game, and Gorr is on to 4. And now the Leviathans can chase it down, but there's damage being returned by the Kings. No kills have dropped, despite 2 health bars being red, and somehow it's CaptainTwig and the Kings who turn it around for a double.
I think that, look, that is a beautiful Sanctified Fields from Zapman, but well played and well disengaged from the Kings. Again, a little bit of CC immunity used out there. The biggest thing that hurts them is while those Sanctified Fields are dropping, BigManTingz is throwing out a Stinger right at the exact moment. And so while the damage is a little slower, while they're not moving quite as well, you've got Nemesis with 2 dashes, you got the capabilities, I mean, beads used, right, to be able to make sure you can keep moving. And you're able to chase those kills down, get everybody low.
Whoa.
Meanwhile, you've got Variety kind of pulling Jarcorrr from the rest of the team. Ronngyu still hadn't rejoined. It was a good fight from the Kings.
Split-second shot calling from the Kings means a Fire Giant's going to get pulled. Circle Protection confirms it. And the Leviathans have a couple members close by. It's their front line now being chased down as Twig looks for a 1v1 against Panitom on right. Rongyu's just going to get left alone here. 4-man stun, yay, but you get a kill over to Netrioid. The Kings have found another. Plus Fire Giant on all 5, and the game has been broken wide open.
And just staggered out like that too. Ronngyu, lower cooldown, level 13, will respawn faster than some of the others, the 2 carries that had died prior to that. But that's a lot of time for a 4v5. That's a lot of time to be able to work into this. If you burn through the tower fast enough, which 20 minutes in, especially after 9-5, now that you got minions, it goes by incredibly fast. And with this wave, should have about 10 seconds, 5 to respawn and then 5 to get here without having to deal with Ronngyu.
And you have double ADC and CaptainTwig, so objectives as far as towers, Phoenixes, an afterthought for the Camelot Kings with FG. Talk about value. Look at the last 2 minutes for the Camelot Kings, 3 minutes. I don't know, the time is an illusion, Gorr. You fight around the Gold Fury, and that's where it starts. And then do the little, oh, that's the start of a filming scene. I was gonna do the little clapper thing, but
yeah, the clapper.
That's when you start.
Well,
okay, the end of the scene is now pulling away from this Phoenix. Unbelievable few minutes for the Kings.
Yeah, kill in mid on Ronngyu. Into pressure out the rest of the Levi's. And like you said, it took like 30 seconds from
well, we can't end the scene yet.
Activity.
We're gonna get a pyro.
Yeah, and then you get to go over, you get the Fury, then reset. Okay, cool, Sanctified Fields is dropped, win that team fight anyway. Reset, Fire Giant, Tower, yeah. Phoenix, Pyro. Now you get a little bit of a relaxation for it, for a moment, a breath if you're the Leviathans here. Because in the span of 3 minutes, you lost 7,000 gold, man. It is just well played by the Kings, I think, knowing where to put their pressure. Heavy investment. I mean, it was 4 ults that were used to kill Ronngyu that first time around. But knowing that you're going to be able to pick up your Stinger and get that relatively fast back into it, and knowing that 5-on-4 advantage is going to be massive, especially without the Terra, the source of healing for the team there, you get to leverage that against the Leviathans pretty easily. Circle of Protection. I think he earns its money right there on the FG.
Yeah.
But realistically, I think that the numbers advantage was a big deal. And trying to fight that Fury for the Levi's just before Ronngyu could fully be in the fight definitely ended up kind of hurting them, putting them into an awkward position, numbers advantage over to the Kings. And then they just kept that going, right? They kill 2 more people, and then it doesn't matter that Rongyu's back. It's a 5v3.
The absolute dream scenario is that all the Kings go back. Twig takes a lot of damage here. All the Kings go back, and they all leave base with double-digit gold after they buy. So, I mean, near perfect value on all of their purchases. They can now regroup with their newfound gold lead and send some damage towards Zapman. Maybe pick up a kill as well. There's your poke damage from Netrioid. And Gore, suddenly the entire game is at risk.
Yeah, again, blink and you missed it. If you
gone
got
for 45
up,
seconds.
if you got up for a little bit and you come back to this state of the game, it's absolutely wild. Just well played by the Kings and their focus right now, right? I mean, you've got a composition that if there was a Capri on the side of the Leviathans, it would absolutely be ruining a lot of what the Kings want, because a lot of it has been single target. Let's just kill this dude. Let's kill him as quick as possible. Whether it's a stun from genetics or, like you said, initiation from Netrioid, that burn, Tings with the stinger, things like that, just make it incredibly easy for them to choose one target and just kill him off. And if you don't have anyone around to protect them, then yeah, they're going to do it. I mean, that's how they got Ronngyu. That's how they just got zapped. That's what they've been working at. That's how they got Ronngyu the second time. And so I think the Kings are just, they built a draft and they're playing it to the T what it's supposed to do, and the Levi's just don't have an answer.
I was wondering if they were going to push for the end, that Zapman was dead, but no, we're going to fight one more time. Let's pad the stats a bit more. A grouping from the Kings. Give some damage over to Panitom in the bat out of hell, but Zapman again, my goodness, what is happening? In the last couple of minutes, Zapman has died off twice. And now, again, the game is at risk. The Camelot Kings have killed off the Leviathans ADC, have a real good look at killing off the support. Jungler, mid, solo, all under threat as well, as is the third Phoenix.
Yeah, I mean, look, you've got fire minions going in. You're a 5v3. Variety's low. Netrioid doesn't have ult just yet. It feels like you have to play this one
Variety's got
safe.
teleport.
Yeah, with teleport coming in, you should be able to get aggressive here, and you've got 30 seconds to work with without Ronngyu or Zap. The duo lane on that long. Yeah, kill off this bird. You can get aggressive. I think they could win here if they really wanted to push it.
Again. You know,
oh, they've got Fire Giant coming up. I forgot that it fell off.
Look, this is the high octane fuel that's pumping through my cardiovascular system that's saying just to run it down and go for the win. This is the Kings we're talking about. No shot with the Fire Giant coming back up. They're rolling the dice. This is the age-old conversation of you got a 98% chance of winning if you fight for the game right there. Now you've got a 99.9% chance of winning as you go back, spend your gold, and get the Fire Giant.
Here's what's wild to me. So 6 minutes ago, 12 towers are on the map. No massive kill changes. It's like 1 to 1, 1 to 0, and then suddenly, kill for the Kings. Kills for the Kings. Objectives for the Kings. Things like that. Small pickups that lead to bigger things. But they wipe all of the towers out. They wipe all of the Phoenixes out. Now they're going to wipe a lot of the Leviathans.
Is this how the game's going to end? The Leviathans fighting for an Oni Fury? You know the Kings went back. You know the Fury's about to come back up. And Panitom, I don't think Netrioid's got all of the damage with Masterful Shot there. And so, luckily, Panitom will live, but not with that bat out of hell. The game's over, though. I mean, Panitom and Sheento can't defend against 5 members with Fire Giant. The Leviathans, they step up to the Oni Fury, they lose 3 team members, and now you lose the game. The game was going to end anyway, but that has sealed it. And the Kings, with the masterclass and turnaround, win a fight around the Fury and win the next 5 minutes.
Well, I mean, that's just insane, man. Like, the strength that the Kings illustrated, the quickness of which gold got out of hand, how they changed the map state. Again, 19 minutes, and 1 Gold Fury had been taken. I think 1 Pyro had been taken, maybe 2 Pyros at that point. All the towers are still up. Nobody's really got a massive lead. You know, it's like 500 going back and forth between the 2 of them. And then a pick in mid into picks around the Gold Fury, or the Oni Fury at the time, picking up even more of it, getting that kill. Immediate, and you called it, but just great shot calling from the Kings to rush the Fire Giant while they had that advantage. They get that pop. Suddenly, 6 towers are down, 3 Phoenixes are gone. I mean, the Levi's were in the worst position, not only having to fight back from that kind of scenario, but there's still 6 towers on the other side. You had nothing in terms of map pressure.
If the Leviathans were going to win that game, we would have been at the 60-minute mark by the time that game was
dig their heels in and push.
Camelot Kings, a team amazing at pushing small things into really big things, and the big thing here is the Titan falling. Camelot Kings grab game 1. Leviathans, time to bounce back right after this.
Game number 1 turns around over for the Camelot Kings in order to take that one over the Atlantis Leviathans. And all the machines that our pros are playing on, the laptops that we're using on the desk, and the PCs that our production team are all working on in the back, are all brought to us by our good friends over at Alienware. So make sure that you go to smitegame.com/Alienware. Use code AWSMITE09 to see what kind of great discounts and offers that Alienware has to you out there. You get to check up on all the specs that are running in those machines, those Aurora Ryzen 10 desktops, the monitors that we are running as well. Those are like the 24-inch, 240 hertz monitors, way better than anything I'm running, trust me, between PC and monitor. So if you want some of the top-of-line gaming gear, make sure that you go to Alienware and check out all of their stuff. Follow them on Instagram and Twitter at Alienware, and go to AlienwareArena.com to see all the other great stuff that Alienware has to offer to you. Thank you so much to Alienware for coming back in Season 9 of the SMITE Pro League. J-Mac and Trelly joining me on the desk once again to break down game number 1, which for the first, 17, 18 minutes, Leviathans had, what was it, a single kill versus 1?
Yep.
It was 1-0 versus 1-1. And then we get to one little Gold Fury fight where the Camelot Kings break open. They find 2 or 3 picks during that one. And from that point on, the Camelot Kings just ran away with the game. They take a Fire Giant. They take a couple of team fights after. They take another Fire Giant. It just felt like the Kings were unstoppable once they got that first little bit of momentum in their favor.
Yeah, just slow and methodical Kings Smite, even though they were down the 1 kill at that point. The gold wasn't ever too far out. They were even ahead at this point into this fight. And, I highlighted before the game started that if Zapman's Sanctified fields were on point, it would be difficult to try and stop them, and he got a massive Sanctified field, and it did not matter. The Camelot Kings, it was like a 4-man Sanctified field. He was blown away with autos, but he just did not have enough to really set up. Even this one was pretty decent, but it just didn't matter. The Kings were able to play against it so well, and they trusted their composition. This just looked like typical Kings Smite to me. Like they are okay with playing at a very small deficit. It wasn't like the gold ever got away with them. A little bit of a deficit until late game when they know that their 5v5 team fight, their objective play, that's what you draft this Eset for, that's what you draft this double hunter comp for, was always going to be superior, and it worked out in their favor.
And it's just wild to me. I mean, we go into some of these fights, and you notice from almost every single highlight, it starts with Variety going in and getting a Whirlwind of Rage and Steel, and more often than not, it was Ronngyu being picked up. The one in mid, Ronngyu. The one at the Phoenix was Zapman, but then another one right after, Ronngyu picked up. Jungle fight, Ronngyu being picked up there. And it just goes to show that even though you have this, what feels like a counter matchup for Terra, because when her passive is down, she can't be picked up by Xing, it just felt that Variety always had the perfect timing to make sure that he was grabbing Ronngyu when that passive was down, whenever he wasn't able to get that kind of thing out there. So, Variety, the rest of the Kings, able to go through, find some success onto there, and really make it themselves a name in game number 1. BigManTingz topping the damage charts, of course, 22,000 on the Muzen comp. And it's something that we talk about with this god and this player specifically is AMC, whether that be for Dardes over on the Warriors, whether it be for any of the mid laners, and especially for BigManTingz on the Kings. That is such a dangerous pick to give over to a player like that.
Yeah, name a more iconic duo than AMC and Triple Fizz comps and then just doing lots of damage. It just works out so well because, you want to itemize against it, but once the Stinger comes through, it's just too much prot shred, and it doesn't really matter how tanky you are. With a Nemesis in the back as well, you're never going to be tanky enough.
The double shred comp worked in game number 1 for the Kings. We'll see if they run it back in game number 2, and we'll see what changes do get made for the Atlantis Leviathans to kind of go through here. I mean, their top 3 was solid. They had Osiris, Olorun, Ullr, all great gods to really be able to kind of keep themselves safe. Ullr with a little bit of self-peel of his own, a nice little leap to get out. Olorun obviously with that sanctified field. And the Osiris, we've been singing the praises of that god for quite some time now. But Camelot Kings, just when it came down to those late game fights, playing around that sanctified field seemed second nature to them almost. And that was kind of the second coin was, when you let the Olorun through, do you draft something to deal with the sanctified field, something that can walk through it, or do you just do what the Kings did and just kind of ignore the fact that it even exists?
Yeah, well, it looks like the Leviathans are going to take one of their prot shred picks away, and that will be the Nemesis. And, of course, because the Leviathans are in first pick, that forced the Camelot Kings to then ban the Yamoja and the Daji, respectively. So now, Leviathans have the option to once again put some stock in that Osiris. I think Jarcorrr had a fine performance on it. I really did expect it to go into the jungle, but in solo lane, it was fine. It just wasn't able to be that successful. So now Leviathans are going to run that back. Maybe they think just because that Nemesis is gone, there's not going to be enough prot shred to run the same style of composition, and they've sort of just cracked the code, right? Now that that's gone, we're fine.
Yeah. With the Khepri, Ullr, and Nemesis taken away, as you say, from CaptainTwig.
A mother
Kings
bear is
continue to
very
make sure that the
protective of
Yomoji
her
doesn't get
allies.
through. Dodgy Chernobog. Now leaves open Osiris over for the Atlantis Leviathans to grab as a first pick once again. Still some flexibility. We thought initially that Osiris was going to go over to Panitom in the jungle, but instead it was taken over to the Soul Lane for Jarcorrr. And now, if this Osiris is going back over to the Soul, we'll have to face off against Artio, which has become a signature pick for variety for the Camelot Kings. And Eset locked in once again. Still some flexibility if that one goes to BMT, but if history is any indication of, at least as of last game, could be that we've already locked in our frontliners for the Kings.
Yeah, and it's a decent front line at that. And given the situation, the Leviathans have the option to grab this Xing Chen, and if it's me, even if this wasn't the game plan, even if we haven't practiced it, like put Panitom on the Osiris and grab that Xing Chen. The win rate on Xing Chen is absurd right now. Auto attack is so strong, and the CC, it's a decent matchup in the Artio if you can save the hook slam for the dash. I think you're always gonna have a decent time in lane, and it looks like that will be the call. Again, even if that wasn't the initial plan, like Osiris going back to Jarcorrr, given the situation Artio's through, I think you had to grab the Xing Chen there.
Yeah, Xing Chen Medusa, maybe the most interesting of the first 5 picks that have come through so far. Is we've only seen one Medusa game so far in Phase 2 of the SPL. Has its one win that it's gotten.
Does 100%.
100%. It's pretty good. Go 1 for 1. Can't beat that. Can't beat that number.
Well, unfortunately, now we're going to have to at least get,
Yeah, we're gonna
it's either going to 50%
or it's 100.
Or
Man,
still
talk,
100.
talk about percentage drops there. That was something I remember. It was Mifflin and Dave talking about that on the desk one time, where dang, one win is going to bump you up like 1%, or I guess in this case 0, because it's going to say 100-100. But one loss, man. Talk about having a win rate there. But talk about another popular god, at least for the Kings, and Chiron picked up 50% win rate on the 18 games that he has had played so far. So the Horseman has been bringing mixed success across the board, but for the Camelot Kings as the
Netrioid.
whole, it's been bringing a lot of success.
Yeah, mixed success throughout the league, but if you're Netrioid, you're just simply not missing, and he's been giving me a fair bit of fantasy points, so I appreciate it
That's
for
good on you.
continuously hitting those Centaurus snipes. Soul and Olorun taken away, trying to get rid of these magical ADCs. They recognize the Leviathans probably need a little bit of magical damage here. Doesn't have to be a mage, though. They could just look for a hunter and grab another guardian, but Zapman has been playing the mages, and why stop now at this point? You know, the question would be, however, are you throwing Sheento into the mid lane on the Medusa, which I don't think it gives the best clear. I don't think it's going to have the best matchup. With the fact that, you know, Ullr is still available, I just don't imagine that's where they would go to. So at the moment, I'm just gonna put that in the duo lane in my brain. You know, it's gonna hold there. Batz gets locked in. This is one of those picks that every time it comes through, I say, you know, despite the fact that Batz is in the meta, despite the fact that he's not that contested, he's always got to be solid. I mean, his ultimate is always going to bring some value. Sure, he'll get out pressured by the Osirises of the world, by the Erlungshens of the world, but if you can just play for late game like the Kings do more often than not, and just hit a massive team fight ult, who cares if you're losing pressure in the early?
And small little buff that came the way of Batz with this patch specifically, that overhand smash, now gives him knockback and knockup immunity while channeling that, and also deals just a little bit more damage. 10 more damage at base rank, and then a little bit, I believe it's 15 extra damage whenever you get it to that max rank. So, a little bit of love shown over to the Monkey of the Jungle for the Camelot Kings. Now, to Leviathans, Sobek and Huang going to be locked in. And we've been seeing since Xing Chen is here, a lot more of him thrown over towards the Soul Lane when it's something else, but we haven't seen a ton of Xing Chen support. So, for you, Trulli, would you rather see the Xing Chen go towards Ronngyu, or do you think Sobek would be the better call for that duo lane?
If I'm honest, they both have similar interactions into Artio, but Sobek brings anti-heal, which I think will make the lane a little bit better. But if you're not looking for a kill, it really doesn't matter. Like, it does not matter. If you're not looking for a kill, they both farm similarly. It really just depends on, do you want this Xing Chen to be able to get to the back line, or do you want this Sobek to be able to just plug the front line? For my money, they're interchangeable. You can put it either way. However, I feel like Artio having the cripple field for the Sobek is going to be a little bit more useful. You can pre-cripple the pluck, or you can try to force it out, use the root, and chase him down. So if Variety had a choice, I imagine he would prefer the Sobek, but again, I don't think it matters too much. And since the Huang got locked in, you know, last patch or even before that, I might have just assumed that was Huang mid, but given the fact that Zapman loves those mages, probably will be the Medusa mid, which could bring you know, a little bit more team fight presence than Ullr, but still. Wait, hold up. So they did pivot here. So Genetics is gonna take that Ymir, and then BigManTingz is going to grab the Eset. So because the AMC and the Nemesis were taken away, they've had to pivot. They can't go for that double hunter composition. They didn't have the shred to lock it in. And notably, the Nemesis was banned first, so they could have grabbed the AMC, but they decided not to, and they said, you know what, we're going to need some magical damage here. Let's switch that Eset to be in mid, and we're going to get a very tanky composition in the double Guardian Ymir Artio.
And that also does pivot kind of the play around circle protection. Whenever Eset goes to these more support style of roles, we don't get a lot of damage, if really any damage, built on a god like that. So circle protection doesn't hit nearly as hard, especially when you're thinking even compared to like a single shot from a late game Centaurus, or the Phoenix Fire from Huang, something like that, or Dueling Dragons. But now that you're throwing Eset over into the mid lane, it becomes a much more weighted coin toss in favor of the Camelot Kings, I imagine, because that's going to be now the hardest hitting ability on the map comparatively. So for the Atlantis Leviathans, kind of their struggle, at least in game number 1, was around that Gold Fury, around that team fight kind of play. Charlie, do you think that the Leviathans have themselves a better team fight comp to try and fight into the Kings this time around?
Well, they both have double Guardian. The Leviathans definitely have the early pressure, no doubt. I mean, Osiris is going to bring it in spades. Huang is going to bring it in spades. You're looking at a Batz who does not want to fight until level 5, and even then, you're hoping that someone else is forcing beads with you, because Batz is going to get the beads and then doesn't have too much damage after the fact. Late game, of course, there's some fight potential there. You can get some pretty hard-hitting auto attacks and abilities, but you got to give the early to the Leviathans, which they already had last game, right? In game number 1, the Leviathans had the early. The issue was not their early game. You're asking me about the late game. They've got a Medusa who is fairly easy to stop the dash, and that's usually why she hasn't been played as of recent. The itemization is a little bit different right now, what you're trying to force into. I do think they have plenty of damage, and if they can protect their backline, which they have 3 tanks, so they should be able to. It really just depends on, are you letting this composition get late game? CaptainTwig is definitely going to make an impact on this Batz. He knows how to place those Fear No Evils to make sure to get the max value, and that's what you got to worry about. You have to make sure you're shutting down this Batz late game, because those ults cannot be getting the value that they are.
Yeah, I mean, when we look then maybe at the mid 2v2, or even kind of just talk about the junglers in general, we talk about, or at least you're talking more on how Batz is a level 5 god. Once level 5 is there, Batz is online, he can start going to any of these lanes, making those impacts. Osiris can definitely do that a little bit earlier. Level 1, level 2 is typically where we can see some of those ganks. So if you're Panitom on this Osiris, which of those lanes are you trying to put that early pressure on for Leviathans to get themselves a nice bolster?
It's unfortunate because you're looking over at that solo lane and you see 2 Guardians, but that's where you would like to go, try to get Jarcorrr ahead. I imagine that's the idea. It's just hard to execute.
We'll see if Panitom can execute on that and bring the Leviathans to a game 3, or are the Camelot Kings going to sweep it away in 2? Let's jump right into game number 2 and find out.
Atlantis Leviathans would love this game to get a bit later on. I mean, look at this draft core. They've got Sobek in solo. They've got Ronngyu playing the Xing Chen, Panitom, likely building a bit more damagey than full-on tank, but the double Guardian style. Now, that said, you say it for the Leviathans, you got to say it for the Camelot Kings as well. Variety on the Artio, genetics on the Ymir, but the big initiation factor from CaptainTwig could be a difference maker in the late game team fights.
Yeah, I'm really excited to watch how this entire thing can shake out, because I think that Ymir pick, I mean, it just kind of shifts everything. Admittedly, Panitom with ult is going to be able to get over the walls. Sheento will get over those walls regularly. Ronngyu can get over those walls regularly. Jarcorrr and Zapman, though, going to be locked in more often than not by good walls from genetics. And if you burn, this is the thing, Huang 3 can get burned very quickly with some of these other abilities. I mean, Freeze, Spirit Ball, anything else that makes Sheento fear. That means that you're going to be able to watch him go up, watch him come down, slam the wall up right afterward and make sure he can't get away. And so I think that that's going to be fun to watch in the late game dynamic. You mentioned the Batz ult. And you know what? Based on last game, I think we should only talk about late game dynamic.
Honestly.
I don't know how much of it. I guess Panitom on this Osiris should be able to get a little more hands-on than what we saw. But the Batz is really going to want to farm up for a majority of the early game.
Yeah, we'll talk to you guys in 20 minutes when the Leviathans have a 1,000 gold lead. Although I don't know. I don't know how often that happens to the Kings, right? Like if the game is stable and it's 15 minutes, even not being ahead, being even, but like behind. I don't know how often that happens to the Kings. Not often this phase, that's for sure. And so that's some good for the Leviathans to take away. Again, really that early Gold Fury call in game 1 was the large gold difference maker. But again, I'll reiterate, I don't think that sneaking away a 10-minute Gold Fury is something that happens against the Kings all that often. So great call by the Leviathans and a rare fumble from the Kings in game 1. didn't end up making that much of a difference, but as far as game pacing goes, required a bit of a comeback from the Camelot Kings. As always, Gore, the jungle's going to be the dynamic here early. You got Panitom on the Osiris, CaptainTwig on the Batz. Really, level 5 for both of these two opens up so much gank potential, that Lord of the Afterlife in. But honestly, the Fear No Evil, as far as beads burning, so important. And there's only 2 sets of beads to burn on the Leviathan side. That said, Sheento plenty safe with the float out and the beads. How safe is BigManTingz? Spirit Ball connects. There's got to be damage here as the stun is through. And it is the jungle that gets it started. Atlantis Leviathans with Panitom snag first blood.
Well, so if you're wondering, Panitom on Camazotz versus Panitom on Osiris is a 7-minute difference in first blood capabilities, is what we just got out of that one. I mean, much earlier, much more impactful, really well played off the Huang, and you know, it highlights something that I was kind of looking over. I was looking at the Leviathans, how safe are they going to be in some of these late game fights. Should have been looking on the other side. You know, I think it's interesting. You know, we haven't talked about it as much over the last couple of weeks because kind of beating a dead horse, but you know, BigManTingz playing on large ping. Eset's not going to be the easiest one to do that with, right? I mean, Spirit Ball's kind of wide, but can be difficult, things like that.
You said BigManTingz is playing on large ping.
Yeah.
Would you say he's playing on BigManTingz?
BigManTingz, yeah.
Sorry, go ahead. It was just right there.
Yeah, it was right there. I'm glad you won. But that plus, like, you know, Batz has a leap. Artio's pretty safe. I think late game, most of them are tanky, but I think the Eset and mid has to be a little worried, right? Because plays like that, where it's just like, cool, you're not escaping us. like he's going to slow you all to hell. I'm going to root you, and then we're just going to have the damage to kill you.
Yep.
And that's not including Sobek Flux. It's not including Ronngyu and the ult, as well as the lockdown that a Xing can bring. Or, even Medusa lacerate, right? Like, I mean, little things. I don't expect to see that last one, but, like, anything on the Levi's that can lock down BigManTingz could definitely be problematic for the Kings.
Yeah, look, and now Panitom has gone Stone Cutting Sword, a option on the Osiris build that we often see some junglers. It's maybe evenly split nowadays between Golden Blade start. Stone Cutting Sword allows you to get a bit more active, a bit more aggressive early in the game. And already Panitom making use, a quick journey around the backside of the Camelot Kings jungle. Drops a buff, or drops a ward rather, on the red buff of the Camelot Kings. Ronngyu wanting to get active, level 5 hit. Zapman there as well. And the mutually assured destruction of the entire duo lane has everyone watching each other float by.
And you know what? I kind of like that. I like the mutually assured destruction as well. Like, it's just not going to work out well. Wait. This is going to help come in and secure a blue buff away from Jarcorrr. So that's going to feel nice, I think, for their team. Also worth noting, Twig hit 5 prior to Panitom. And so, you know, Panitom had better gold because of the first blood bounty, things like that, able to finish the tier 3 a lot faster. And you can see that in the net worth. It's about 300 gold separating the two right now. But the farm, in general, and now level 6 for Twig, has just been better. I mean, that first blood bounty has been already cut a little bit just by Twig. And while I think the overall team is still ahead, that's a really interesting dynamic to me to see how well that Twig is keeping up on this one, Batz. And also focusing, I mean, I think, like, if there was some god in the game that I could think epitomizes CaptainTwig's playstyle, Batz is maybe the best one. Because still able to get active, level 5, really good in the team fights, whether it's setup, he can find kills on his own. You know, he can kind of do the whole damn thing if he wants. But his power curve is farm for a little bit, then start to get a little active, show up every now and then.
Be annoying.
And then slowly but surely hit that point where late game you're just the guy. Like, you are the team for a lot of your engagements, for a lot of your fights. And so I think that just showcases a lot of how Twig likes to play anyway.
Well, Twig with no mana would love this Totem of Coup. He's got more than enough damage to finish it. It's just Jarcorrr being annoying. Really being annoying at this point. He wants this coup, but Twig will get it. But again, Twig doesn't have any mana. Maybe just had enough for an ability or two, and Twig will get out just fine. But Ronngyu over on the right side of the map can put some pressure on the variety. Between Ronngyu and Jarc, no chance there's enough damage to kill off this Artio.
Man.
And with the Genji's guard, and so variety will be just fine. And finally, one item in, we've reached outside of jungle pressure. Nothing to look at here in the solo lane.
Yeah, very simply. Yep, we're just going to scoff at whatever damage you throw at us. Doesn't even matter. I'm interested in the dynamic, you know, because I was highlighting, okay, here's how you can get us away from these walls. And I negated to look at the rest of the comp and think about Artio's cripple field.
Yeah.
And the idea that if they decide to, in certain circumstances, granted, it requires very specifics, right? Like, it's not this massive cripple field. It's still pretty big. But that requires variety to be next to the wall or near the player in question. The wall has to be really good to lock them in, and you have to be shutting down one of the players that has something that can get them out of there. And so I think there's a very easy opportunity for the Kings that will show up, admittedly sometimes more niche, but will show up, where they can just decide that all of a sudden you're not getting away from this fight and very much enact that play. But I think it's going to be not quite as consistent as it could be, right? That requires a lot of different variables and essentially 3 people, genetics, variety, and whoever they're attacking to all have everything line up perfectly. Won't always end up being that way, but I still think something, especially, I mean, look at, like, I love the jungle. If you've played, anybody has played in the Smite Nights on the old Conquest map, the jungle corridors here are a lot bigger than they used to be.
They sure are.
But man, like, one good wall just feels like so oppressive in terms of your disengage.
Jungle pressure, yes, but immediately countered out. Plenty of damage still onto Jarcorrr from CaptainTwig. But Jarcorrr will be okay. Beads off of BigManTingz. Now Genetics and his own red buff engaged upon by Ronngyu. Panitom's going to put his pressure on the left side of the map while Twig has his on right. Centaurus through from Netrioid. A bit of damage connects, and a bit is somehow an overstatement. Ronngyu and Panitom leap out just fine.
Now, Dave, there's a lot of little things to highlight in there. So naturally, my brain locked onto what it was very obviously the most important aspect of that, which is jungle pressure. Has the same ring to it as the song Under Pressure, and so anyone out there who wants to make a parody, that's a real that one feels really
pushing
good.
Pushing down on me, pushing down on the. Ooh.
Dude, we're halfway there already. Once you get the chorus, the rest of it all falls in, right?
We're halfway there. Dude, we're on a good throwback.
This has been Dave and Gore in the 80s.
Thank you for tuning in to 101.6 SMITE FM with Dave and Gore. Oh no, actually we get in trouble for that. I gotta stop singing. It sounds so close to the original. We'll move on, Gore.
They've all been less than 5 seconds.
That's right.
And there's no live scrubbers, Dave. We're fine.
That's right. Camelot Kings. Now, I'll stand corrected. I said it doesn't happen often to the Camelot Kings where they fall a bit behind, but they have 1,000 gold. Remember the first blood differential. Maybe the most important in the gold lead here, but little things like that. Ronngyu walks forward, takes away the purple buff. This will be a 2 versus 2. No junglers on the left side of the map. As CaptainTwig over towards the right. Panitom back at base has reset. BigManTingz needs a bit of time to scale up here. Book of Thoth and the Warlock staff will be stacking up. Now this is the style of build that on certain characters Myth doesn't like because you're just totally neglecting CDR depending on what you go towards next. But I guess a BigManTingz's goal is to Spirit Ball, Wing Gust, detonate someone.
They're doing it.
Then
they're playing ping pong,
in
baby.
a good spot. They're juggling it. The Gold Fury desperately trying to hit someone. Genetics is just distracting right now. If the Kings are able to get Gold Fury, which they are, I think you're gladly trading Genetics for a kill that's split 3 ways on the Atlantis Leviathans.
Yeah, I mean, and look at the graph. I mean, even if they are able to go over there, luckily there's not like a crazy big burst on the side of the Leviathans to help kind of fight that circle of protection, so it feels like it's going to go their way. Like you said, Genetics, I mean, plays that pretty much perfectly. Hey, I'm going to be obnoxious around your purple buff. I'm not here for the purple buff. I'm not here. I'm not even here for a kill. I'm here just for you to look at me.
Yeah,
I'm a shiny, bright Ymir skin, beautiful, elegant purple that matches the Kings, and I just want you to pay attention to me. And they do. They take the bait and just chomp down hard.
Yark stunned and feared by the Fear No Evil. You're investing a lot if you're the Kings to get a kill onto the Leviathan solo laner, and Variety will finish off the damage. But now, so much of your initiation, the Fear No Evil's been used. What else can you do? Maybe put pressure onto Sheento. Great wall from Genetics as the disengage from Sheento has already been used. Just need more mana. CaptainTwig doesn't have the ability to go back in, but a good freeze from the Ymir keeps this fight going. And suddenly the Camelot Kings have turned around a couple kills, but they have lost their mid in trade.
A 2-for-1 should be able to start up the Pyro. Netrioid's already on it. The rest of the team didn't even need to get there. Should be and did start up the Pyromancer. No problem for him there. And I like this call. Again, if you're going to go 2-for-1, it's going to go roughly equal, right? A little more in favor of the Kings. That is the big kicker to make sure that things go a little bit more in your favor. It also showcases what I was saying earlier, right? If Sheento has that dash prior to the wall, then gonna get out of there. No problem. Gonna be able to escape. Genetics has to drop the wall. It's a big utility. Man is gone. Things like that. Sheento, right after the dash is done, he's not going anywhere, man. You got him locked in. I think well played by Genetics. Again, just kind of reading that. And look, this is the reason, you know, I know we saw some, like, I saw some stuff on Twitter where they were like, man, why aren't there any front lines in the MVP vote? Genetics was on there 2 weeks in a row. And it's because he keeps making plays like this, man.
Who's saying that?
That was fine, okay.
I feel like there's been front lines on every MVP vote.
Except this last one.
All right, so that was 1 week without front lines.
They just haven't won yet.
Yeah, I was gonna say maybe there's value in saying they haven't won the MVP vote yet.
And that's up to you, the community.
Yeah, that's on you guys. Don't yell at us. As Ronngyu engages into the backline, but he is alone. Jarcorrr is as well. Burst from the earth. And how about that Fear No Evil from CaptainTwig? The wall has separated out this fight for so long, but still the Kings in an odd-numbered fight on the back end, unable to finish off any of these kills. This is unbelievable. Is everyone going to survive? 3 red health bars on the Leviathans, and every single player on the map remains on the map.
Genetics wanted more. Variety, I think, even wanted more, but you know, very similar circumstances. Twig was in the red, Tingz and Netrioid yellow. Yeah, you don't want to get too deep in that fight. I'm looking at Zapman, though. What is he, A, what is he going for? And B, what's his accomplishment over there? He's hanging out deep in the jungle, I guess maybe trying to catch anybody out if he could. But unfortunately for them, not going to be able to find it. No buffs were available, nothing to steal, no green, no purple. So he just had to walk away. But impressive that all 10, I mean, that was a huge skirmish for nothing.
For nothing.
To realistically change that much.
CaptainTwig has been the initiator we expected. The Hun Batz has dropped Fear No Evil a couple of times, sent the Leviathans running every which way, but still behind in kills. There's First Blood, individual pick here and there. The Camelot Kings got the 2-for-1 on right, and that's where their 2 kills have come from. Panitom has done a good job of diving the backline, but it's a different type of initiation. It's more of a I'm running at you, you better run for me type, where Twig is setting up for the rest of his team. The 1-level lead in the jungle, difference maker. 1 level in solo for the Camelot Kings as well. But the carries of the Leviathans have been farming up just fine. Warlock Staff, Divine Ruin for Sheento. Expect some more burst damage to be around the corner now that the Obsidian Shard has been completed. A decent little power spike there for the Leviathans and something to play around.
I'm interested where he's going to start exerting his will over the next couple of minutes here for Twig, right? Because you've got your Blink, Fear No Evil. We've seen it used a lot on Jarcorrr. The Jarcorrr with ult and as tanky as they are now with the breastplate online as well as the Genshis, feels like it's going to be a little more difficult to try and burn that one down. And with the Fury coming up, that plus Ymir plus Circle of Protection feels like, well, the Leviathans will now have vision on it, but the Kings have a distinct advantage in my mind over anybody on the Leviathans for picking something up like that. And so I think that's where a lot of my mind is going to be contributed. This left side of the map, suddenly very heavy. Pyromancer's not going to be up for another couple of minutes, so you've got a lot of time to work with to try and find your leverage. Where is it going to be? Usually, and I think at this point, even though it hasn't happened just yet, but like pressure onto Zap, probably the easiest to attain. Maybe getting rid of him prior to a big team fight would be an easy opener. Ronngyu, I mean, we talk about Xing really good at typically engaging and disengaging, but can get caught off guard. So I wouldn't be surprised if the Kings are able to find an opportunity somewhere from the duo lane to find a kill.
Instead, a bit of a grouping over on the right by the Pyro. But both teams will just split the mid-camps and back themselves away. Good ward coverage from the Kings over on left, but that is matched by the Leviathans' ward coverage as well. So both teams have good eyes on the Oni Fury, and then the Oracles, of course, for the Levi's make a difference. Zapman going a bit more traditional in a build here, stacking up the Transcendence, Aussie, Xe. Remember, Executioner has a couple of glyphs. From what we've seen, only one of them really viable for full attack speed style hunters. Whereas junglers have been opting for the latter. And so, could see some of that depending on where Panitom ends up going with his build. I didn't realize Zapman was our MV primer of the week. I noticed his little
Yeah, he's
crown
got the
on his
crown
head.
on his head, man. Look at him. There it is.
You know what? This is a Dave PSA. I appreciate the willingness of all the players to wear their most valuable primer crown. I think it adds a lot, and it gives you something unique to play for. You know, if I were a player, I'd want to be a primer, so I could. But I can be a primer, Gore.
Anybody can be a primer.
Anyone can be a primer. The most valuable primer, however, is Zapman for this week, and his team needs him to step up around this Fury. Because this is the style of fight, remember, that really turned around game one.
Yeah.
The Kings found a couple of picks, get the Fury, transition that to a Fire Giant, so on and so forth. But still seemingly enough pressure from the Leviathans that have got the Kings backpedaling. That's because a Sobek pluck just changes the dynamic of a game so heavily. As BigManTingz jumped on relentlessly, dodges the pluck, but there's an Osiris diving you as well. And there's your individual pick. The Leviathans have found themselves an advantage.
And that just goes to show how different this team fight is for the Kings. I mean, that was two big circular team fight ults used trying to get the disengage, but not enough healing from circular protection, not enough damage to peel away, not enough, of a fear, not heavy enough there.
Wasn't
from
scary
Twig.
enough.
Look at this. Okay, I think they're going for Pyro.
Yeah.
I almost liked the idea of watching the Kings just rush the Fire Giant, knowing that meant there was an Oni Fury on the other side.
Luckily for the Leviathans, Sheento and Jarcorrr on this side of the map. If this gets stolen, which it does not, nearly on time was Sheento, but the Kings at least will get the Pyromancer. So we split the objectives, but Fury confirmed for the Leviathans. That feels good. Again, stabilizes out this game just a bit. 600-700 gold in the lead are the Camelot Kings. And we're starting to barrel our way towards team fight time. You know, the one individual pick here and there is making a difference around the Furies, but with the map now neutralized, no Fury, no Pyro, feels like we're going to farm up for a couple minutes, see if we can get some of these characters closer to level 20. The Zapman is 2 levels ahead of Netrioid. The Medusa, which we don't often see, has been able to farm up just fine. These next few minutes could be quiet, but really set the stage for what could be a very dynamic team fight.
Fear No Evil needs to be, I think, a little heavier. That was used for peel. I think it showcases how easily that last fight, that skirmish in mid, how easily BigManTingz can be jumped on and chased down and killed off, and they don't have to think really too much about it. You know, Netrioid just now uses his ult. I think Panitom's been doing a great job getting to the backline and sticking to people. And so that's what I'd be the most worried about if I'm the Kings, is not just their team fight, but also trying to stop Panitom from getting aggressive.
Gore, do you like hugs?
Yeah.
Would you say you like if a Sentinel gave you a hug, would you like it?
Wait, like a Sentinel? Like from X-Men?
Like a Sentinel's embrace, would you like it?
What does a Sentinel look like in like mythology?
Well,
I'm not kidding you. I hear the word Sentinel, I think of the big, giant mechanical beings from X-Men. I don't want a hug from them.
Well, BigManTingz does. What a weird bit for me to just bring up the fact that Tings has gotten a Sentinel's embrace. Prots, a little extra GP5, and it's really the physical and magical prots either getting split up or just by yourself if you're alone, Gore. Tings has been relentlessly jumped on.
Yes.
You know, and so if he's alone, that's going to help out. You forego a starter item for the stacking items. Maybe you free yourself up for something a bit more defensive. We'll see if this ends up helping.
And again, notably, and this is something that has been very interesting, but being able to upgrade it a little bit earlier, right? So you don't have to wait till 20 all of a sudden to get this burst for yourself. And I think it falls into that category.
Whoa.
I mean, you're talking about anything to give you prots.
Into the Whirlwind of Rage and Steel is Variety. The Artio, just no chance to play. Talk about Chain CC. Pluck, Whirlwind of Rage and Steel, potentially a Petrify from Zapman. Variety just did not have any say in what happened there. The Camelot Kings don't pull the trigger on any sort of defensive ultimates, though. CaptainTwig thought about it, holds on to the Fear No Evil. Tier 1 on the right goes down. Leviathan's playing the map very effectively.
And I love this, right? You know, you've got an advantage that you could force around the FG, but you've got so much time that Variety's dead that I like that they're putting their pressure onto the towers. They've got the minion wave with them. Once this is gone, whether you knock down the tower or if you feel confident with the Emperor's armor, just keep the fight.
That is beautiful from CaptainTwig. Blink forward, fear no evil onto a few, and takes the beads off of both of the carries of the Atlantis Leviathans. Perfectly in sync, Sheento and Zapman without their beads, and that'll keep the Tier 2 tower right on the map. It's what you needed right on time from CaptainTwig.
And they used just enough time. I think the Leviathans were hoping to burn through that a little faster because now Variety's back. Variety teleported in. They could even look for a retreat fight.
No, it's Variety teleported in only to die. It is a nightmare scenario, but Variety will live and assist a kill. And now, suddenly the Camelot Kings have this nice advantage. You have used your circle of protection. So, as far as near confirming an objective for yourself, that is now gone, but waiting for that next rotation of ultimates to come back. Zapman used the Petrify, but a double kill from BigManTingz, and suddenly the Eset has ignited, and a wall from Genetics will only slow down Ronngyu, but it looks like Fire Giant may be the call.
And that kill was sponsored by the beads burn that happened under that Tier 2 and right.
You're
right?
saying
Just
something.
being able to get a little more aggressive, burn that early, and then chase him down. You're only looking for that kill to pick off Sheento or pick off Zap, and now you've got the 3v5 advantage. This is looking good.
Fire Giant taken down. It's half HP. No circle of protection, but a fight from the Leviathans to keep the big one on the map, but CaptainTwig has got something else in mind. Sheento will be stunned out as well, and Spirit Ball doesn't travel that far, but not needed. Everyone from the Kings getting involved. The Leviathans, Gore, talk about a difference of a couple of minutes. Again, you get a kill on a BigManTingz, and now suddenly you're going to one by one lose everyone on your team, and the Camelot Kings are going to get the Fire Giant, might be able to push down a Tier 2 tower, and they're going to build up a big lead.
I really do think that it's the difference of where they put their aggression. I think the Kings, you know what, let's rewind. The Leviathans, and their advantage, they get the single kill onto Variety, they knock down a Tier 1 in right, and they continue to try and fight into the Tier 2 on right, where it essentially is acting, even though hampered by the Emperor's armor, is making up for a little bit of that fifth man, right? You've got good clear, but you've got some damage to knock them back. Good CC is all you need. You get some relics, and then surge forward from the Kings. The advantage that they had there in jumping, they kill off Jarcorrr pretty easily the first time around. Then they get Zap, and that feels like that should be the moment for the Leviathans. Probably let up.
Right.
But then the Kings are choosing a fight in neutral territory. They're not wandering any deeper. The Leviathans go into Kings territory and end up losing. The Kings keep it in the middle, and the Leviathans continue to fight. But they fight without any advantages around them, with anything helping them. And so that gives the Kings even more to work with, because they've got the numbers in their favor. They've got ults in their favor, relics in their favor, all of that. And so they get another kill, and then they get another kill, and then they get another kill, and to the point where, you know, now the Leviathans, like you said, feel really knocked out of it. They did, you know, well enough in terms of map state. They're gotten 100% more towers than they did last game, and you know, it's only been 2, but it's something. But now the Kings are in a position to do something very similar. Only 1 tower has been knocked down so far on the Levi's side. That means there's a lot of gold for the Kings to pick up here, and that's how it spiraled out of control last time. That's how we got to 6 items for them. And it might be, what, about 5 minutes later, 6 minutes later than they did it? But it is a very similar state of the game. And so I like where the Leviathans are. They know that they're not going to be pushing too hard, so there's 2 over there on right, making sure that Tier 2 goes down.
Man, this Camelot, zoom out with me for a minute, if you will, Gore. I mean, this Kings team is just so good. They're playing such good Smite, specifically here in Phase 2. And with how competitive the SPL is, you're always at risk of losing a set. The Leviathans showed up the last time these 2 teams played. And the Leviathans showed up in both of the early games of games 1 and 2 here in this set. And it's looking like it might just be a 2-game set because the Kings are just so resilient. Their shot calling feels so on point. Their objective play, rarely incorrect, even when behind just a bit. It's like a team that really knows its strengths and knows its moments to strike. And it's going to take moving heaven and earth for the Leviathans to come back here in Game 2. Still an option, still an opportunity, yes, but it's not like the Kings to expose themselves to too many mistakes. And I want to appreciate really good Smite, and the Kings have been playing some of the best consistent Smite over the course of the last 10 or so weeks, and it's been a lot of fun to watch. for this squad. Now, Variety, has he opened himself up to a mistake? Right as I've talked about it, as a Fear No Evil drops, and that may just save the Kings here in this fight. The backline being dove by Panitom. BigManTingz backpedaling away. Ronngyu has found the backline yet again. CaptainTwig brawling out, and it's a caster's curse of all eternity. The Leviathans are capitalizing on a mistake of the Camelot Kings, but BigManTingz keeps the Kings even here. Both solos, both jungles down. It'll be a matchup of the carries plus supports.
Well, Netrioid, I like that dash forward. Look,
HP.
I like them going for the fight. They got a freeze. They've got the damage.
And it is full HP on the Chiron, and Netrioid finds himself the killing spree. Suddenly, Sheento and Zapman have to rely on their poke damage. A lot of it there for Sheento, but with genetics, one stray wall, one freeze makes a big difference. And not clean by any means.
No.
I will accept that. I am gushing over the Kings. And then Variety teleports in, walks in, dies, nearly causes a chaos. But the Kings were able to stabilize.
And it really does go to show, and I think this is something I can say with confidence because of how they've performed. The Leviathans have been a team for 2.5 years now. A little longer if you want to count their SEC run, but at least in the SPL, 2.5 years. Where their team fight, their 5-man team fight, was really just unmatched. I mean, there were people who could take them, go 5-on-5 and sometimes beat them, but consistently, Leviathans were winning late-game team fights around FG pits, things like that. I think that right now, they still have a similar style, but unfortunately, they've been met and surpassed. I think the Kings, when it comes to macro play across the map, we're talking farm, neutral objectives, things like that early on in the game. When it comes to disengage, like tactical retreats, I would argue, where things aren't going well, but let's get everybody out alive, or as many as we can. I think they do that incredibly well. And then now, I think the 5-man team fight and the shot calling, as you said it earlier, for the Kings are just phenomenal. I think that they have been able to level up to this honestly insanely potent team.
Gore, I'm laughing because I was actually reading yesterday about how George Washington has as many
losses
as he does wins. He was the master of the tactical retreat, which is funny to say about a team made up of almost entirely British players. That they're like the George Washington. From us, baby. Like that's right, USA. They're like the George Washington of the SPL. They know how and when to disengage. But you're spot on because it's about living to fight the next fight, not giving up too much and just wearing down the opposing side.
Somewhere a bald eagle just cried a happy tear, baby.
It did, with an American flag, like a rainbow in the sky behind it. But Camelot Kings playing very good SMITE, and now can team fight their way to a 2-0 win over the Leviathans. It's an initiation from CaptainTwig, and it is a finished off kill by Twig. Netrioid does the same as well. The Fire Giant Gore, it may very well not matter, but Twig will be a sacrifice here. Suddenly, the front line of the Leviathans is what's left, and it's down to 2. The Camelot Kings got all their damage dealers minus Twig.
And I like this split. Look, Variety's going to play chase. He's going to stop Panitom from backing as much as possible. They've got a Trebuchet on right. Who cares about it? You've got one guy in Ronngyu in front of you. Variety wins this fight most of the time. Even worst case scenario, Variety somehow loses to Panitom. You've kept him so far distracted, you've got at least a Phoenix, if not the Titan.
You've got one spinny boy back on defense who doesn't have his spinny ability, and so you're not going to be sending anyone back to Fountain. The Camelot Kings, they bought their time here. Now you have 10 seconds on Sheento. Does look like the Kings will have enough damage, though, to get this game done. Ronngyu trying to body block out as much as he can. But it'll be a 2-0. The Circle of Protection will confirm it, and the Kings, they remain the best team in the league one more week.
And that's a big deal, being able to have one loss to a team and then come back, beat that team 2-0, make sure that you've kind of planted yourselves once again up towards the top. It's the consistency right now that we're seeing out of the Kings. We always talk about it a lot when we're talking about teams being a little wonky, kind of in the middle, where sometimes they show up, sometimes they don't. I think we're seeing that out of a couple of teams in the league, but we got to mention it here when you see this team playing as well as they are right now. I think that the Kings have been coming in, again, really good early game, even though it's not kill-centric. That's fine. Nothing's kill-centric right now. Every game has been a little lower in general. And so being able to farm better, being able to find objectives better, being able to then coalesce into 3v3s a little bit better, find picks better than you. They're going to team fight better than you. They're just doing everything better than anybody else.
The Camelot Kings, the George Washingtons of the SPL? Maybe. That's Gore and I's thoughts. We'll go back to the desk to hear what they have to say.
I don't know if I'll call them George Washington's SPL. I'll let you keep that one over there, Dave. But what we can say about the Camelot Kings at the least is that this is a team that we talk about their macro play all the time, Charlie. We talk about how good they are in team fights all the time. And when you get into games and sets like this one, this just further emphasizes why we keep highlighting those points, why we keep bringing those ones up. When it comes down to their play around Fire Giants, Pyros, Gold Furies, the Kings seem unmatched, and that's why we're seeing them at the top of the standings, even after games like these.
Yeah, it seems like even if they fall down early, which, it doesn't happen very often. In game number 1, they were down 1-0, which is not massive in any way.
No.
They were down a little bit in this game as well. They were really, it just seemed to me like they were playing for the late game Eset. Once you get online, once BigManTingz built, because he was going for a stacking build, right? Once those items came online, they were able to play through the circle of protection around these objectives so much more freely. And when your Eset is doing damage like that, obviously the rest of the team follows suit. Everyone looked good. Twig was sort of playing the sacrificial lamb in this instance, where he was going in, getting these ults, and then dying, but it didn't really matter. They had so much confirm and sustain on their squad. Netrioid, pretty sure goes 4-0 in that game as well, able to provide so much long-range damage. And the tanks did exactly what they needed to, right? Variety and Genetics were making sure to not only PO, but they were also going in. Right, he had like 2 HP throughout this whole fight, but he had all the CC he needed to for his carries to just clean up.
And as we start getting to these late game fights, and the one that kind of broke things open is Sheento was able to find some good disengage on this Huang. The problem is that CaptainTwig, Variety, Genetics, all of these guys are able to constantly close the gap on this Huang. So no matter how safe this god may feel with 2 forms of CC immunity to his kid, a set of beads and an Aegis, or not even an Aegis in that case, it was a shell this game, it just wasn't enough. And we always talk about the backline of the Leviathans typically being some of the safest in the league. I mean, we put them up there at kind of the same levels with the Tartarus Titans, where their carries are very safe. It's hard to get back there, get past this front line. But the Kings were able to do so in spades this game, whether it be BigManTingz just getting damage from long range out there, Genetics literally closing Pats off by dropping this wall. In my opinion, Genetics on this pick specifically might be more dangerous than Genetics on Umoja, and I know that might sound a little bit blasphemous and a little bit like a stretch, but this might be one of his best picks.
Yeah, I'm not gonna say it's better than the Umoja, but it definitely is up there for sure. It needs to be respected and feared. I also want to comment on, you said we think the Leviathans have one of the safest backlines. Do you think Zapman plays safe?
Well, when we get to actual team fight play, and when we talk about that, it's mostly when Sheento is still alive going during some of those. I know we like to make the meme all the time when Leviathans go into a fight 4v5. Typically, that's their best point. But on the more realistic point, once we get to late game team fights, Leviathans do typically have a little bit of safety in that back line. Their front line is so good getting things back, but the front line of the Camelot Kings this time around was so good at being able to close up that gap. Variety on the Artio, able to close in and make sure to really put Sheento in a really bad spot. Genetics able to throw up those walls and put everybody in a bad spot. And speaking about Genetics, we actually have him standing by for our post-game interview for the Camelot Kings. Congrats on the 2-0 win over the Leviathans. Cheers. When we talked to Variety kind of in the pre-game interview that got talked about earlier, he kind of made a joke about, with a team like the Leviathans, we'll win one and then they win one. You kind of do like a pseudo win trade in that instance. Yeah. How does it feel coming after a loss on the Leviathans last time and getting such a powerful 2-0 on them this time?
Yeah, well, we had a pretty strong first half of the phase, and we should have beat Leviathans. We threw game 2, and then game 3, I think we just maybe got run over. But it was always a close matchup between us. It just depends who has the better drafts. And I think right now, the Mayor's kind of favoring us a little bit. So I think that's why we've probably won today.
Mm-hmm. So for you over in the support role specifically, I mean, we've had a lot of changes, bunch of new items coming through, some changes across the board. I mean, how do you feel support is right now with these changes in the mid-season?
It's pretty exciting, but I'm going to keep playing Kepri Emoji every game until they're terrible.
Going to keep playing the same things until you just can't do it anymore. But for your team on the whole, you said it favors you guys a little bit, and we talked a little bit about how your team is kind of designated, you're all one big unit, but you're all like masters of playing your role out there. Do you feel that's kind of the same mentality across the board for your team?
Yeah, I think everyone's just, I mean, we don't play a lot of the game, but when we do play, we play the same role, which usually helps win SPL games. And we just play the same, we just have like a god pool of each of us, and we just practice over and over again. And we've been a little bit more resilient, a little bit more straight on with our practice this year, and just try to play more similar gods rather than just a bunch of different gods. I think it's helped us a little bit to learn the meta. Yeah,
I mean, whenever you guys get some of those picks, it's been working out for you, and you guys have been looking good. Congrats on your wins next. Let's get back and continue to celebrate. Thanks for coming by.
Cheers.
And that's something we talked about with the Kings before, is, been some of their god pools across, do they need to expand out there? Well, yes, every team needs to definitely get a little bit more under their belt, but these 3 to 4 picks that it seems that every one of the members of this team has gotten in has been so powerful, whether it be, you know, the joking around there, the Yamoja and the Khepri, or even the Ymir for genetics, even all the way over CaptainTwig with some of his picks out there. The Camelot Kings looking good, and they find themselves at 2-0. We'll take a look, though, at the schedule, because this is only our first half of the day, Charlie. This is only our first set, and we still got another one coming. The Oni Warriors and the Tartarus Titans will be our next one up after 2-0 for the Camelot Kings. And as I said earlier in the day, make sure that you're tuning in again tomorrow, because we're going to kick off. The Leviathans will be back against the Jade Dragons, and the Kings will be back again against the Scarabs and the Bolts and the Valkyries. We'll square off to round off our triple header Sunday. But that next matchup between the Oni Warriors and the Titans, I think this could be a very interesting one, where this one could go 2-0 either way very easily, or this could be a long drawn out 2-1. And I think it really depends on which version of these two teams that we get out here today, Charlie.
Yeah, there's just no way to predict it, because coming into this phase, we're obviously in the second half, but coming into this phase, most people, I think, were looking at the Tartarus Titans and thinking they were on top of the world. You know, the Titans they looked so solid. They won Masters. They were uncontested. The meta has shifted up a little bit. I think they're struggling to find their footing. The Oni Warriors also have been looking very solid. You know, they're coming into their own meta as well. So it's a difficult one to predict at the moment. I gotta say that the Warriors have been playing a little bit cleaner Smite, but the Tartarus Titans, they have the talent, and they definitely have the know-how to be able to adapt to this sort of meta. You know, I gotta look at, you know, SOT, for example. He's got to be whooping up something in that lane to try and help out the squad, something like that. So it's gonna be a close one, no doubt.
Yeah, you never know what's gonna come from either of these two teams. Camelot Kings, the Oni Warriors. It's gonna be a coin toss of a matchup. You're not gonna want to miss it, because it's coming up right after this break.